Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we are just doing a bit of a review about, I think, an important work in literature. This is Bushido, The Way of the Samurai. I'd also like to have Sun Tzu's Art of War, but I have yet to have a copy of that book. But, um, I do have a copy of Bushido. Um, it's based on the Hagakure by Tsunetomo Yamamoto. Um, but anyway, I figure since this is kind of a short book, it's right around 100 pages when you add the um, all the little things in um, forwards and historical context, da 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 da. So I thought we would do a little bit of a series on this Bushido. I can't seem to find my bookmarks. I have one that's metal with the top 50 books to read, and the other one's a bookmark. It looks like a regular bookmark, but with a picture of now I can't remember the guy. He's from Naruto. Has the ability to shadow capture. I can't remember his name. He gets with Tamari in the series, but he's always like, what a bother. Ends up being like his very strategic mind, though. I can't. She, whatever. Point is, yes, I'm a nerd. I've watched and done a little bit of everything in the nerd culture. But what I was going to say, using a magic card, non-color land, just as a bookmark until I find my actual bookmarks. I don't know where they went to. I really do need to do some cleaning. Anyway, let's kind of get into this, shall we? Bushido, The Way of the Samurai. And of course, this was um, an idea of proper etiquette for samurai because they were considered the upper class warriors in Japan. But here we go. Forward. This is the forward. Minoru Tanaka speaks English better than anyone I have met in Japan. He has devoted himself single-mindedly to its study for many years, and now teaches the subject at a university near Osaka. At first, I attempted to help him with his studies, but when I found he was reading Chaucer and Beowulf in the original, I threw up my hands in despair and conceded I could no longer be of assistance to him. So he is the proper person to have translated the classic Hagakure, I believe. As a rule, one translates from a foreign language to his own tongue. In this instance, Tanaka-san has reversed the usual process. It is for this reason that I have stepped in, made some corrections, and occasionally rearranged the wording of his excellent translation. Some of the ideas in the book are so startling that it has not been easy to put them into workable English. Where possible, we have left unchanged the quaint and colorful expressions found in the original, rather than prosaically reducing them to everyday English. I first met Tanaka Sensei in Kyoto in 1969. I was ambling down a side street off Kurasama Dori on my way to the alley where the main entrance of the Tenrikyo church community at which I was staying was located, when I heard a loudspeaker announce that English class was about to begin. Noticing that I was passing a small junior college, I spontaneously turned in the entrance and followed some students to the class. It turned out that Tanaka was teaching it, and we quickly became good friends. I casually invited him to visit me at the church, and he did so a few days later at exactly the time we were about to have formal tea ceremony for three charming female interpreters from Geneva. Tanaka joined us for what he sheepishly admitted was his first chanyo, or chanoyu, sorry, or tea ceremony. Subsequently, he came to visit me every Saturday, at which time he would drink tea while he helped me with my Japanese, and I attempted to aid him with his excellent English. Years later, he visited me in America, and we worked together to bring the Hagakure to the English-speaking public, all because of a well-timed loudspeaker announcement. It is my belief that it is important for Westerners to understand the seemingly strange concepts of Bushido, not only a guide to events of the past, but a primer for understanding the Japanese business mentality of today. It is hard for Westerners to believe that Japanese employees will not take vacations because of loyalty to their employers. Such loyalty to the large corporation borders on the fanatic, and it is a common occurrence to hear poorly paid subordinates joyfully singing company songs and chant slogans before work begins each day. This is not done cynically. The employer occupies a paternalistic position in relation to his employees. Seldom is anyone fired. In the case of an outright bungling or even dishonesty, a face-saving excuse may be fabricated and the offending one transferred to another position. And employees, even highest executives, do not quit their jobs or look for better paying opportunities. Employment is usually of the lifetime variety, with the employer, just as with the Lord in medieval times, takes a deep interest in the employee's personal life, family, children, etc. One may rightly say The vice presidents of today are the loyal samurai retainers of the clan, in this case, the corporation, who will give themselves unstintingly for the common, not the personal, cause. It is partially because of this two-sided loyalty and the strength it imparts that Japan rose from a bombed-out, defeated nation to a position of envied affluence in less than 30 years. This way of thinking is completely contrary to what we know in the West, and I believe Tanaka's translation will enable many Westerners to better understand what they are competing against. This will be interesting to the reader to note the many Zen Buddhist terms that are used in this book. Facing death every day, the samurai warriors had to go beyond life and death in order to live the courage and humanity, or equanimity, and the practical teaching and practice of Zen enabled them to do so. Royalty are attracted to Shingon Buddhism with its ritual and trappings. The philosophically minded gravitated to Tendai, and the common person naturally followed the way of devotion, Shin Buddhism. But the samurai, not interested in words and speculations, found the meditation and 24-hour awareness of Zen invaluable in his calling as a warrior knight and made full use of it. It is necessary for the reader to abstain from judging while reading this sometimes strange book. I suggest it be read as the important document it is, without praise or condemnation. The praise probably coming from those involved in the martial arts and similar groups. There is little reason to doubt that the Hagakure will play an important role in the future of Japan as it has in the past, and our leaders had better learn to comprehend it. If there is any awkwardness of language, please put the blame on me. I have been loath to needlessly tamper with the native mode of expression. Justin Stone, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then it goes on a historical overview. And this is 4 pages, so bear with me here. The shogunate rule, 1603 to 1867, was a period of peace and political stability. In order to preserve its power, the shogunate government maintained a closed-door policy toward all foreign countries. Under the shogunate system, each clan was relatively independent, but was required to pay allegiance to the central government of the shogunate. With each clan, the lord and his samurais composed the leading class. As a ruling group, they held dominion over the farmers, manufacturers, merchants, and craftsmen. The author of Hagakure, Sunitomo Yamamoto, 1659 to 1719, was a member of the powerful Nabashima clan. As a youth, Yamamoto attended on his master, Lord Mitsuhige or Mitsushige Nabashima. For 30 years, Yamamoto devoted his life to the service of his lord and clan. His service varied from being a page boy to a highly respected samurai. Then on the death of Mitsushige Nabashima in 1700, Yamamoto renounced the world and retired to a hermitage in the mountains. 10 years later, Suramoto Tashiro visited him and became his close friend and disciple. For a period of 7 years, 1710 to 1716, they lived together in the mountain retreat. During this time, Tashiro recorded verbatim what his master said to him at random. Yamamoto forbade Tashiro to publish the talks that were later to be called Hagakure, which literally means hidden behind the leaves. The reason he forbade publication was that he knew his teachings were too radical and excessive for the then peaceful world. Also, his ideas were not altogether consistent with the then prevalent official study of the teachings of Confucius, who advocated peace and order. During the period that Hagakure was being recorded, peace within the country enabled the people to devote time to cultural matters. Even the samurais, who were expected to be warriors, tended to forget their experiences in the civil wars, 1467 to 1568. They began to neglect their military practices and their mastery of Bushido, the way of the samurai, and gave more and more of their time and attention to personal accomplishments rather than the military arts and the traditional service of their lord. They did this knowing that they were expected to be efficient bureaucrats in the service of the lord and his clan, and as a result tended to become tender and effeminate. They began to act out of their own self-interest. No definite idea prevailed among the samurais at this time. During this period, Yamamoto came to the conclusion that respectability and discretion were based on man's preference of life to death. In other words, he saw cowardice and fear as the basis for all the various kinds of humanitarian ideas and philosophies. Regardless of ideas and philosophies, he suggested that the samurai throw away all self imposed limitations caused by the choice of life rather than death. In his talks, he wanted every samurai to become a Superman, but he wanted supermen who were capable of gaining great power, not for their own self interest, but for the interest of the clan. He wanted supermen who were capable of operating effectively for the solidarity of the clan. In spite of Yamamoto's prohibition, the original writings of Hagakure were secretly copied by hand. They were then circulated among the so-called awakened samurais. Yet the book was kept secret from the general public until it was eventually published in 1906. The publication influenced many Japanese, particularly generals and officers, and others engaged in the control of military power. The 80 years or so from the restoration of imperial rule in 1867 to the surrender of Japan to the Allied forces in 1945 was a period of continual warfare for Japan. This warfare was based upon the economic development and military expansion of the country. During this period, the relation between the Lord and his samurais changed into a similar relation between the emperor and his trusted soldiers. During the last stage in the Pacific War, 1941 to 1945, the kamikaze fighting pilots, made up mostly of students, rationalized their actions of self-sacrifice through the often quoted passage of Hagakure. I have found the essence of Bushido to die. When the Empire of Japan surrendered to the Allied powers in 1945, Hagakure was burned because it was considered to be an ideological war crime. A war criminal, sorry. Give me a moment, I'm just looking there. Okay. Though the book was burned, its spirit still survived. It is the energy from this spirit that has enabled the Japanese people to revive and rapidly develop their economy and national prestige. Today, there exists a general belief that a powerful force, militarism based on the so-called economic imperialism, is again reviving Japan. The very existence of this belief, be it valid or not, accounts for the recent revival of Hagakure among the Japanese people. Since the end of the Pacific War, 4 different editions of Hagakure have been published in Japan. There is no doubt that Hagakure has come to be read by more and more Japanese as a book of today. Indeed, one of the latest editions, has emphasized the up-to-dateness of Hagakure as a book showing how individual members of an organization should cooperate with one another in the common cause. According to this edition, the basic pattern of the Japanese society has remained the same. The present clans take on the form of the Japanese business company. The executive of the company, or often company itself, is the lord. The businessmen are the present day samurais. who literally give themselves to their clans. Hagakure is a book for those interested in discovering the truth about Japan and the Japanese people. It will certainly give the reader a deeper insight into the traditional Japanese mentality. Minoru Tanaka, Osaka, Japan. Okay. And then we got a quick note from the transcriber's preface. Let me see. I think that will be the last thing we talk about today. Yeah. So last thing here we're going to read today is the transcriber's preface, and then we'll start on a note from the author, or author's introduction, which was written by the original author, Yamamoto. So anyway, this is the transcriber's preface. Um, These 11 volumes, from beginning to end, must be burned in due course of time. I have put down verbatim that the author remembers for his own future reference on the society, the right and wrong of samurais, conjecture, manners and customs, etc. These notes may very well arouse ill feeling. It is best to remember that the author has repeatedly and strictly told me to burn these manuscripts. We first met March the 5th in the year of Hoi, 1710. How far from the floating world these mountain cherries are. And these that was a haiku poem developed by the author Tsunemoto Yamamoto, or sorry, Suramoto Yamamoto. No, Tsunemoto. There's a Suramoto and there's a Tsunetomo. So the first one is by Tsunetomo Yamamoto. Okay, and this one, let me read that first one again. Tsunetomo Yamamoto. How far from the floating world these mountain cherries are. And then this one is by Suramoto Tashiro. Under a white cloud, I have just come across a flower. So, two haiku by people involved with the creation of this work. And that's all I'm going to read today because that nearly makes this a 30-minute video. As I said, the next one we read, I'll deal with the author's introduction. And maybe even get into book one, the essence of Bushido. But I won't have much trouble keeping it in readings because it breaks up real small parts like this. So, and like I said, it's a small book, so it won't be too difficult. But that was Hagakure, or as it's often known, Bushido, the way of the samurai. I figured a little bit of culture would be nice. So, this was a small book, so I figured, hey, not a bad one to read. Anyway, as always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. If someone tries to tell you something that you're not sure of, ask them to cite their sources. Anyone who's worth anything will try to list their sources. Then look at those sources yourself and compare them, because sometimes they use faulty sources. In other words, really look at what what you're being told. Look at the sources. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.